Tonight on 24, many ambiguities surrounding the new round of Iran-US negotiations. Under the shadow of war's return, the US president says the naval blockade will continue and a ceasefire extension is unlikely. Pezeshkian also says the Iranian people won't submit to coercion. Iran's political factions are deeply divided over negotiations. An IRGC-linked media outlet states Tehran will avoid America's theater, while Ghalibaf labels the Haidari Front as extremist militias. And the arrest of members of a terrorist group affiliated with the Islamic Republic in Sharjah. The United Arab Emirates says these individuals were seeking to carry out terrorist operations. From the Iran International Studio, this is 24 with Fardad Farahzad. Viewers of Iran International in Iran and around the world, hello and good evening. On the eve of a new round of Iran-US negotiations, Donald Trump has said he is also ready to meet with senior officials of the Islamic Republic if talks progress. According to Donald Trump, extending the ceasefire with the Islamic Republic is highly unlikely, and the naval blockade of Iran will continue until the parties reach an agreement. A White House official has also told Iran International that the US negotiating team, including J.D. Vance, Steve Bitkoff, and Jared Kushner, intend to go to Islamabad soon. My colleague Samira Karai is with us from the White House in Washington. Samira, there's a lot of conflicting information, and the situation regarding the American delegation's trip isn't very clear yet either. If they're supposed to talk with Iranian officials in Islamabad tomorrow, that is, if they come to Islamabad, then they should really be leaving right about now.
They should be leaving by now. Mr. Trump had spoken directly with the New York Post earlier today. In that conversation, he confidently mentioned that the American delegation, specifically meaning Mr. Vance, Bitkoff, and Kushner, are already on their way. However, it later became quite clear that they haven't actually left Washington yet. Seeking clarification, I spoke with one of the informed officials here, who specifically handles travel planning. I said, do you confirm that they are still waiting in Washington? And their careful response was that they are currently just planning for this upcoming trip. So that means this highly anticipated trip hasn't happened yet. Following that delay, I can almost definitively say it was about 2 hours ago that we actually saw Mr. Vance enter the White House grounds, meaning he's currently here. At this point, it's widely expected that they will finally leave tomorrow. But the reality is that we still don't have an exact date or precise time for Air Force Two's official departure from here. We do know, however, that the United States firmly intends for this important trip to happen. Mr. Trump is still fully willing to make this journey, pushing forward despite all the severe geopolitical tensions that have specifically arisen in the Strait of Hormuz over the past 48 hours. On the social media network Truth Social today, Mr. Trump has also spoken several times about Iran and about what's happening, or at least in the 2 or 3 posts he's published. He's really blaming the media in the United States and their approach to the discussion of war, and he's really connecting the actions Mr. Trump has taken to the 2024 election, and how you guys there also thought I would lose. Your polls there said I was neck and neck with Kamala Harris, but you clearly saw that you were entirely wrong. You realized that you are just fake news. And your manipulated polls are completely useless to yourselves. Regarding Iran, you will also see that the exact same thing, very similar to the unexpected outcome of the 2024 election, will inevitably happen. These are the specific points he has repeatedly referred to. He firmly says, Israel didn't drag me into this war. I had valid reasons. I had a lifetime of profound reasons to be absolutely sure that the Islamic Republic genuinely doesn't want to acquire dangerous nuclear weapons. And after October 7th, another reason was added. When I saw the result of that, I found another reason why the Islamic Republic shouldn't acquire nuclear weapons. Today, Mr. Trump's approach is like this. The general sentiment, the vibe, is that it won't move towards a ceasefire extension. So if we're looking at it precisely by the clock, tomorrow afternoon, our time, here in the eastern US, the ceasefire is supposed to end. But, from what Mr. Trump told PBS, he says he considers the ceasefire deadline to be this Wednesday. So if the delegation goes on Tuesday, I'm not speaking from the Islamic Republic side because the news about their delegation is very contradictory. In fact, the confusion today has been even greater than about the American delegation regarding whether they will attend. The New York Times says they definitely will. Meanwhile, Reuters recently quoted Pakistani officials saying they can convince the Iranians are getting a positive response and they will also come. If the delegations arrive on Tuesday, they'll have almost less than 24 hours to see if they can finalize any agreement before the ceasefire deadline officially ends or not. Tasneem wrote just an hour ago that there's also the pressing issue of the ongoing naval blockade, saying they must lift the blockade entirely if they want us to come to the negotiating table. Furthermore, they feel there are unreasonable demands, which, refers directly to those tense discussions about nuclear enrichment limits. Despite the differences, if the delegations go, they'll have less than 24 hours to see if the ceasefire will be extended or not. Mr. Trump says he will not extend the ceasefire. He emphasized this again today. And after that, it's expected that, maybe we might want to enter another set of military tensions. Maybe not on the scale of a 5-week war, maybe less. It's just not clear. But today, there was quite a bit of unusual activity happening around here. Mr. Ruby was actually here today. He came in, gave a briefing right in this very room, and quickly left. It seems no official news has been released to the public about this yet, but maybe it was something like another urgent national security meeting with Mr. Trump, Mr. Ruby, Mr. Haxis, and the rest of his senior government officials regarding the escalate situation in the Strait of Hormuz and the naval blockade. The United States has actually seized a large tanker, a cargo ship of the Islamic Republic, famously named Pascha. If the Islamic Republic comes to this negotiating table, it means that despite the naval blockade and despite the seizure of its assets, it has come to talk with the United States.
Thank you. My colleague Samira Garai from the White House in Washington, D.C. with us. Samira mentioned that it's still serious, and apparently she's in Washington. It's now a little past 11:30 p.m. local time in Islamabad, meaning if they leave right now, they will arrive in Islamabad a little before 2 p.m. on Tuesday local time. Therefore, if negotiations are to take place on Tuesday, not many hours are left for the American delegations to depart from Washington. Meanwhile, in Israel, as the ceasefire deadline with Iran approaches, Benjamin Netanyahu has emphasized that Israel's operation in Iran has not yet ended.
Our flag has been proudly raised from the depths of the Gaza Strip to the peak of Mount Hermon, and our courageous pilots control the skies of the region. This serves as undeniable proof of our absolute superiority over the axis of Iran. We have not yet completed the vital mission, but the world has already recognized our steadfast determination to defend ourselves. Not only to defend ourselves, but to shield humanity against savage fanaticism. Small Israel and our great friend, the United States, bear the burden of all Western civilization.
Aram Hassami, professor of political science at Montgomery College from Maryland, has joined us. Mr. Hassami, not many hours are left until the critical Tuesday morning deadline in Islamabad. Right now, it is still not entirely clear whether the American and Iranian delegations will officially travel there or not. Do you think all these last-minute diplomatic tensions are merely political rhetoric aimed at gaining more negotiation leverage, or is the probability of another serious confrontation actively increasing?
Yes, well, you have clearly seen that we are living in a highly interconnected world where, with just a single tweet, a rabid news message, or a passing sentence spoken casually at an airplane door, global world markets are completely turned upside down. Instantly, all major media outlets start drawing their undivided attention to a specific region, an unexpected action, a political movement, or a fleeting moment in time. Yet in this hyper-reactive environment, it is perfectly natural that these so-called speculations and rumors constantly exist among the public. However, I am clearly seeing that in President Trump's recent public speech, and even his specific tweet earlier today, nuclear weapons are exactly what he genuinely has in mind. Ultimately, this critical issue is something which, might actually be the very point that can be successfully negotiated. As you also mentioned, I largely see this current posturing as strategic rhetoric, and so to speak, a classic carrot and stick policy. Despite the harsh public statements, ultimately both sides deliberately leave the door open for these diplomatic talks to happen. As you can see, we naturally assume that all individuals involved, meaning the primary negotiators or key parties to the deal, operate on strict rationality. We expect that, especially after the exhaustive toll of this recent 38 to 40-day war, they would prioritize their own political survival and their country's long-term strategic interests. However, the harsh reality is that it is not always like that. Right now, for instance, you can clearly see the specific narrative Netanyahu is aggressively presenting is completely different from Trump's perspective and the Islamic Republic's narrative.
Mohammad Baqir Ghalibaf made some statements in a message that was also broadcast in Iranian media, which seemed to be saying in very cautious and diplomatic language that the power of America and Israel is much greater than ours. Somehow, maybe we were lucky that we've resisted this far, finally. How much do you think that actually he himself probably has a very weak position internally right now? It's not necessarily that he's seized power and is, like Mr. Trump says, the main man in Iran.
It's interesting, well, it'll become entirely clear from these very negotiations. If you remember previously, Khamenei also used to send certain people forward, including those he firmly believed wouldn't really get anywhere, like Zarif, Rouhani, or Arachi. But still, he would always send his own trusted agents to give him direct, unfiltered news about exactly what was going on inside the negotiation room. This thing where a sudden vacuum might have been created after the recent attacks, and, Mustafa getting injured. There's simply no doubt that this critical leadership vacuum currently exists. But I also look at it from another perspective, which is, well, the head of the legislative branch, who has worked with the IRGC for years and has the IRGC's trust. And now the thing is that both the negotiator and the decision maker are the IRGC, because war does this, especially when the supreme leader, the most esteemed leader, is no longer there. So these speculations, these guesses, are also true. But anyway, the one who is negotiating must have some authorities, to be negotiating.
This shit they hit yesterday, why do you think they did that? Because it seems that several Iranian ships, now with fake AIS or from along Iran's coasts, had gone through. What happened that, in your opinion, Mr. Trump, on the verge of negotiations, both attacked and seized this ship?
Yes, I think I'm going back to that same sting and sweetness point. That, the ceasefire might not be extended anymore. Just so you see, it wasn't just symbolic when we said, quote unquote, we'll blockade Iran's ports, or we won't let your ships go. Because, as you know, even in the midst of war, China was buying 2.5 million barrels of oil from Iran daily. So this was also a message like, be careful, we are paying attention. And this actually happens during negotiations, or before negotiations, or even when people gather too, meaning that you essentially want to show your strategic position and actively demonstrate your military capability, your raw power, and show your overall ability to strike. I think this recent talk from Iran too, where they state that we, Iran, are not honest with America, and they really don't want to negotiate, directly refers to this very attack on this naval fleet, or specifically seizing it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Aram Islami, political science professor at Montgomery College. In the U.S., the country's president says Democrats want to harm Washington's strong stance against Tehran, but the U.S. government will not allow Washington to be pressured into accepting an agreement that is not good enough. At the same time, however, in Congress, Republican Senator Todd Young says the time has come to end the war with Iran, and has stated that continuing this war is not in the U.S. national interest, and Washington should focus on preventing further escalation of the conflict. Marzia Hosseini, our correspondent from the U.S. Congress, is with us. Marzia, we're seeing voices opposing the war being heard in Congress, even among Republicans now.
The reality is that Fardad, time here in the U.S. Congress, is strongly moving against Trump. Exactly 6 months and 14 days remain until the U.S. midterm elections. And simply put, when these elections are held and Democrats gain power in Congress, which they will, according to analyses, practically and simply put, it means that the command of this war will leave the White House and come here to the U.S. Congress. And in that case, conditions, as Trump says, will proceed not only for war, but even for any agreement against Trump's wishes. Senator Young himself made the main point today, addressing Democrats too, saying, look, he said, whether we want it or not, we are on the verge of a situation that can only be called war, He said the winner of this war might be Trump, but the loser of this war is all of America. Addressing the Democrats, he said that in the current situation, the U.S. government should not withdraw from this war until it achieves victory. And victory has a very clear and distinct definition: the opening of the Strait of Hormuz, and second, the removal of enriched uranium from inside Iran. And until these demands are met, the Trump administration should not withdraw from this war. This is what this senator is saying. Another perspective that exists, which was also mentioned in Senator Lindsey Graham's tweet, is about Harg Island, about the blockade. And what the press is saying is that the war is ongoing, even at this very moment. It doesn't matter if the Islamic Republic comes to the negotiating table or not, and whether this ceasefire continues or not. What's happening right now in the Strait of Hormuz, meaning the blockade created by the US, this is where the Islamic Republic will be broken. This is an analysis I'm seeing in two analyses, in the Jerusalem Post and Fox News, where actually the analysts of these media outlets believe that what defeated communism wasn't war, it was an economic crisis. They're quoting Reagan and saying they asked Reagan at that time, "What's your plan for communism?" He said, "Bankrupt it," and that's exactly what happened. The ideology of communism with 1 billion people worldwide didn't suffer a military defeat. It went bankrupt. And they're saying this is the way out of this crisis, bankrupting the Islamic Republic. And the current blockade is very similar to the cup of poison that Khomeini drank in the 60s. U.S. media says that in the current time frame, the second cup of poison will also be drunk if this blockade continues long enough that, in fact, according to Trump and according to the Islamic Republic's own media, the Islamic Republic's economy suffers so much, like $500 million daily, that they won't be able to continue this war.
Thank you, Marzia Husseini, our correspondent from the U.S. Congress. It's interesting you mentioned the economic discussion. Mr. Trump also posted something on his social network, Truth Social, about half an hour ago, saying that we are winning, contrary to what American media says. And in his post, he said that the Islamic Republic is losing $500 million daily, an unsustainable figure even in the short term. His reference, naturally, is to the naval blockade of the Persian Gulf. Amidst speculation about a second round of Tehran-Washington negotiations in Islamabad, reports received by Iran International state that Mohammad Bakr Dalibov strongly criticized opponents of the agreement and some activists aligned with the Steadfastness Front during a meeting. According to this report, Dalibov called figures like Saeed Jalili and Amir Hussein Sabati extremist militants who intensify opposition to negotiations by inciting hardline supporters. Dalibov also expressed concern about the possibility of his removal from the parliament speakership and Abbas Araghchi's sidelining from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Meanwhile, over 40 members of parliament aligned with the Steadfastness Front opposed continued negotiations with the U.S. These representatives stated that negotiating without the release of blocked assets is wrong and unacceptable, and there needs to be transparency regarding the negotiation process as well. Mustafa Danishgar, a political analyst from Detroit, has joined us. Mr. Danishgar, when Ali Khamenei was alive, for better or worse, there was ultimately a final say in the Islamic Republic. His son, Mujtaba Khamenei, currently has an unclear status. We don't even know if he's alive or not, and it seems that Mr. Galibov himself hasn't yet been able to fully consolidate power. That's why, it seems, these kinds of disagreements have emerged, isn't that right?
I extend my greetings and respects to you, Mr. Farzad, and to the dedicated viewers and listeners of Iran International. The critical issue is that now, following the notable absence of Ali Khamenei, who historically served as the central pillar of the system and the unifying thread connecting these scattered beads and disparate islands of power within the Islamic Republic, the dynamic has changed. Without his presence, which traditionally played a decisive and final role in navigating such severe crises, especially during major geopolitical shifts, what Mr. Trump now expects from the Islamic Republic, and also from Israel, is solely and exclusively the signing of a surrender document. They will not accept anything less than this. Signing a theoretical surrender document or agreeing to sweeping concessions would represent an unprecedented 180-degree shift from everything the Islamic Republic was designed to be, effectively sparking an absolute internal transformation of the state apparatus. Such a profound geopolitical reversal is only realistically possible with the undisputed presence of someone whose word is recognized as entirely final and decisive. Only the supreme leader wields the unique constitutional and religious authority required to issue this overarching command, and to bestow the necessary legitimacy upon such a paradigm-shifting decision. Make no mistake, This is no small or ordinary policy pivot. It actively means the Islamic Republic consciously deviating from the core ideological pillars that have fundamentally defined its political existence since its inception, namely its fiercely revolutionary, anti-other posture that defines itself in direct opposition to its adversaries. Because this ideological resistance is baked into the regime's DNA, executing a surrender is essentially impossible without the explicit blessing of the supreme leader to officially grant this ultimate permission. Other prominent figures within the current system, even someone as influential as Ghalibaf, simply do not possess the necessary stature, religious weight, or absolute institutional backing to unilaterally manage such a monumental capitulation. For subordinate figures to attempt this pivot, it would inevitably require a catastrophic internal rupture, likely resulting in major bloodshed and a violent systemic coup in the truest sense of the word. What we are seeing in this assembly and scattered islands, both in the military and political blocks, indicates that a part of the system is completely opposed to Ghalibaf's approach. However, what has enabled Ghalibaf is Mr. Trump's will and preference to create a Venezuela-like situation. He seeks a strong man in Tehran to implement a surrender document at a lower cost, even though he has no qualms about paying a higher price to force the Islamic Republic to surrender.
Do you see the capacity in both Ghalibaf himself and the political landscape of the Islamic Republic to undertake such a maneuver? Currently, there is no indication that Ghalibaf can achieve such a thing merely by relying on political maneuvering. When you have someone like Mohammed Bakr Zolgurvit in the Supreme National Security Council, and people like Ahmad Vahidi, Sayed Majid Musavi, and Abdullahi, the commander of Khatam al-Anbiya headquarters, were able to install, or to put it better, impose them, and in a situation where Jalili and Jabali are in state media, in a situation where the Steadfastness Front and Sadiq Masuli haven't had their financial lifelines cut, they can create propaganda, they can incite. They can even make Mr. Ghalibaf sit in front of the camera in a situation like an interrogation. If we look at his video that was released of him, the situation completely interrogates him, and the program host, the one who's asking questions and even insulting him, accuses him of lying. As long as you have this much of what you want to call the steadfast faction, or call them apocalyptic, or call them the hardline and ideological core elements of the Islamic Republic, as long as these guys have such an upper hand, it doesn't seem like these political maneuvers Mr. Ghalibaf is doing will work. And unless there's an iron fist, meaning removing and crushing this faction of Amir Hussein Sabiti and Saeed Jalili, Sadek Masuli, Bakir Zolgard, and Ahmed Vahidi, a layer removal is necessary, in my opinion. Mohammed Bakir Ghalibaf can't handle it. A round of military confrontation.
What about from the US? Excuse me, I'll just open a parenthesis here, Mr. Danishgar. What about from the US? If Mr. Trump is really determined to reach an agreement with Ghalibaf and feels that Ghalibaf has problems internally, how likely do you think it is that he'd start a limited war again to, as you say, remove another layer from that more extremist part of the Islamic Republic?
This isn't entirely an unlikely scenario. In fact, the most probable scenario right now is actually the reinitiation of conflicts with the intention of layer removal. This is the approach that Mr. Trump has talked about, not now, not during the February 28th war, but ever since the 12-day war, when the 5 rounds of negotiations practically reached a deadlock on the first day of the 12-day war. What Mr. Trump said was that those who were against the agreement are no longer there now. At that time, the prevailing understanding in the critical first days and hours was that Ali Shamtani had been removed. So, from that pivotal moment, Donald Trump firmly believed in this calculated tactic of layer removal. And now, observing the Venezuela model, he has come to believe in it even more deeply. He calculates that it forces the Islamic Republic to surrender with significantly less cost. Consequently, it seems the most probable scenario right now is indeed that a targeted, limited conflict will begin, alongside a strategic layer removal, especially considering some figures have come onto the radar because of the ongoing negotiation issue. This could involve targeting the political infrastructure of the Steadfast forces. A sudden layer removal might eliminate key parliament members like Niksad, Amir, Khezrian, and Sabiti. Figures like Jalili and Jabali could also be removed. Furthermore, the state broadcaster or communication channels connecting this faction to their values-based and Hezbollah-based that mobilize the street protests might be cut off. Renewed conflict could disrupt these logistics again, freeing people like Ghalibaf. I believe Mr. Trump prefers this, but Israel and Netanyahu likely have a different conclusion, although Netanyahu is currently cooperating.
Why should Mr. Trump, if it really comes to that, agree to negotiate with a profoundly broken regime? Why should he try so hard to reach a diplomatic conclusion with Ghalibaf? Because at first, after all, there was serious talk of total regime change. There are, well, many motivated opposition forces operating inside Iran today. There is undeniably massive potential there. Mr. Trump himself, at the beginning of the war, had clearly told protesters to stay home, promising that when the time was right, they could emerge and rightfully take back their. We know the potential for overthrow exists strongly inside Iran, regardless of views on the Islamic Republic. Why do you think Mr. Trump doesn't play that last card to bring about fundamental change in Iran, ensuring he doesn't have to worry about another major crisis 4, 5, or 10 years down the road?
I think Mr. Trump has a series of personal and methodical considerations regarding this. What does that mean? It means he's interested in maximally humiliating the Islamic Republic regime with the least cost, while at the same time leading to the destruction of this ideology. This, if I want to put it very briefly, is my understanding of Mr. Trump's behavior towards the Islamic Republic. Meaning he wants to humiliate the Islamic Republic, force it to sign a surrender document, and strip its legitimacy from its social base. Anyway, if the Islamic Republic goes and signs the surrender document, it means it has given up anti-arrogance, practically given up the policy of destroying Israel, and buried all the tools and equipment it had spent billions of dollars on for all these years for this very purpose. It means burying the legacy of Khomeini and Khamenei if the Islamic Republic does this. Well, for someone like Mr. Trump, who has had that perception of the Islamic Republic since the 1980s, and especially with this lower cost, this is the most desirable and the ideal way to implement this issue. After that, well, the process of overthrowing the Islamic Republic will be facilitated, and handing over the Islamic Republic to the protesters who are demanding its overthrow in the streets will be much, much simpler than if the Islamic Republic were to reach an agreement with a sense of victory, and then after its victory start crushing the protesters. And besides, well, the cost is also lower. If someone inside comes and signs a surrender document, instead of billions of dollars worth of bombs being dropped on them, and then they have to surrender at a higher cost.
Thank you, Mustafa Danishgar, political analyst from Detroit, Michigan. The United Arab Emirates released new information regarding the arrest of a terrorist group affiliated with the Islamic Republic previously detained in Sharjah. According to UAE security, these individuals are accused of planning terrorist operations, undermining national security, and illegally transferring money abroad. UAE officials confirmed a network's connection to the Islamic Republic and say they will continue to counter similar security threats. Our correspondent, Mariam Ramati, has joined us from the United Nations in New York. Mariam, it seems the Emiratis are now openly and covertly confronting what appear to be deeply entrenched Islamic Republic networks operating within their country. What specific details do we actually know about these recent targeted arrests in Sharjah?
They are both confronting these Fardad terrorist groups that are doing the Islamic Republic's work inside the UAE, and just 2 weeks ago they were fighting against the Islamic Republic's missiles and drones. If you recall, it was late last month that the UAE announced the discovery of a network linked to Iran and also Hezbollah, related to the Islamic Republic, a network that, according to officials in that country, was involved in money laundering, financing terrorism, and also cover activities. Now, a month has passed since then, and new details from the case have been released. The UAE state security apparatus says members of this network weren't just active in the financial sector. They were also recruiting, organizing, and undertaking efforts to gain access to sensitive centers in the country. Based on reports released so far, 27 people have been arrested and charged. Their accusations include forming a secret organization, pledging allegiance to foreign entities, transferring money to suspicious parties, and threatening national unity. These new details show that the UAE doesn't just see the Islamic Republic's threat at the level of insecurity, but also assesses everything from financial networks to infiltration and internal activities. As part of the Islamic Republic's threat, it says it will confront them, arrest them, and they can't hide. Anyway, this case has also been met with a positive reaction from Kuwait, and at the same time, in Bahrain, reports have been released about the investigation and interrogation of individuals suspected of cooperating with the Islamic Republic during the war. And all of this shows just how much these terrorist groups, which are actually being discovered in these neighboring and Persian Gulf countries, were trying to disrupt the security of these nations, and that the Islamic Republic has gone so far as to have active terrorist groups in neighboring countries and the region. And these developments are happening and being brought up while regional war and tensions were, a war just 2 weeks ago, and now the tensions are still ongoing. Persian Gulf countries are angered by the Strait of Hormuz situation, with the UAE reportedly supporting Trump's war against Iran.
حساس این کشور بر اساس گزارش‌ها و جزئیات پرونده‌ای که تا حالا منتشر شده 27 نفر بازداشت شدن، متهم شدن و اتهام‌های اونها از جمله ایجاد سازمان مخفی، بیعت با نهادهای خارجی، انتقال پول به طرف‌های مشکوک و همچنین تهدید وحدت ملی به اونا نسبت داده شده. این جزئیات جدید نشون میده که امارات تهدید جمهوری اسلامی رو فقط در سطح ناامنی نمیبینه، بلکه از شبکه‌های مالی تا نفوذ و فعالیت‌های داخلی رو هم بخشی از تهدید جمهوری اسلامی ارزیابی میکنه. میگه که با اونا مقابله خواهد کرد، اونا رو دستگیر خواهد کرد و اونا نمیتونن مخفی بشن. به هر حال این پرونده با واکنش مثبت کویت هم همراه شده و همزمان در بحرین هم گزارش‌هایی از بررسی و بازجویی افراد مظنون به همکاری با جمهوری اسلامی در جریان جنگ منتشر شده و همه اینها نشون میده که چقدر این گروه‌های تروریستی که در این کشورهای همسایه و حاشیه خلیج فارس در واقع دارن کشف میشن تلاش میکردن که امنیت این کشورها رو به هم بزنن و اینکه جمهوری اسلامی تا این حد هم پیش رفته که گروه‌های تروریستی فعال در کشورهای همسایه و منطقه داره و این تحولات در حالی داره اتفاق میفته و مطرح میشه که جنگ و تنش‌های منطقه‌ای هم تا همین 2 هفته قبل جنگ بود و الان هم تنش‌ها ادامه داره. وضعیت تنگه هرمز رو ما می‌بینیم، کشورهای خلیج فارس به شدت عصبانی هستند. حتی گزارش‌های منتشر شده در مورد اینکه همین خود امارات طرفدار این هست که دونالد ترامپ رئیس جمهور آمریکا این جنگ رو علیه جمهوری
The Islamic Republic is destroyed, and also several other countries that have adopted the same stance. Saudi Arabia, too, was among these countries. In fact, Mohammed bin Salman himself was encouraging Donald Trump to continue the war and attacks against the Islamic Republic until the destruction of the Islamic Republic regime, according to them. The Islamic Republic regime, according to them. But now, Saudi Arabia's position might have changed a little bit. That is exactly what is currently being reported, but it is important to understand that many neighboring countries in the region are strongly in favor of this development. They support it because they know firsthand that the Islamic Republic is not merely a conventional drone and ballistic missile threat. These very terrorist proxy groups and their destabilizing activities can also severely jeopardize the internal security and economic stability of these sovereign nations. Consequently, these countries are actively trying to fight back against these multifaceted threats originating from the Islamic Republic too, and that is exactly why we continue to see startling new details being released almost every single day from various Persian Gulf countries, illustrating how these malicious cross-border terrorist activities orchestrated by the Islamic Republic have covertly spread to their own countries as well. Fardad.
Thank you, our correspondent Mariam Rahmati from the UN headquarters in New York. The images you were seeing were also released by the Emirates News Agency and, the security services of that country. The European Union says it intends to expand the criteria for sanctions against the Islamic Republic and include individuals and entities responsible for blocking the Strait of Hormuz in its new sanctions list. Meanwhile, the French president, referring to the recent tensions in the Strait of Hormuz, has stated that the continued closure of this waterway and also America's decision for a naval blockade of Iran are both mistakes.
Most likely, after America's decision to continue a targeted blockade in the Strait of Hormuz, especially regarding anything related to Iran, Iranian officials changed their initial stance. In my opinion, this is a mistake from both sides. After that, warnings and warning shots were fired, which caused the ship crews to retreat, and that was the right thing to do. All of this shouldn't lead us towards escalation, but rather should guide us towards strengthening what was achieved on Friday, the unconditional, unselective, and toll-free reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. So we need to continue to calm the situation and move towards reopening this route. Therefore, we remain of the position that issues should be resolved through diplomacy. Everyone needs to remain calm. Let's go back to the decisions made on Friday. Let's maintain the ceasefire, including in Lebanon, as much as possible, and reach a lasting peaceful solution through negotiations on nuclear, missile, Strait of Hormuz, and other issues.
Ali Ahsanpour, our correspondent in Berlin, has joined us. Ali, in a situation where both Iran and the US are practically blockading the Strait of Hormuz, the US for Iranian ships and ports, Iran for all other ships in the world, it seems that the Europeans, who are very much stakeholders in the Strait of Hormuz, are currently only focused on this talk Farabi.
Exactly, Fardad. Well, the European Union usually acts more cautiously compared to other countries. Following the ongoing war in Iran and now the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, it is also considering expanding the scope of its sanctions against the Islamic Republic. Based on reports, and according to 2 European diplomats, the Union now intends to change its sanction criteria in a way that includes all individuals and entities involved in blocking this vital passage. We know the Strait of Hormuz is considered one of the most important energy transit routes in the world, which, well, has practically been closed following attacks by the United States and Israel on the Islamic Republic. And for nearly 2 months now, the transfer of about 1/5 of the world's oil and natural gas has been severely restricted. For nearly 2 months now, the transfer of about 1/5 of the world's oil and natural gas has been severely restricted. Now, this very stance and issue has actually led to direct pressure on the global energy market, especially European countries. And now, continuing in the same vein, according to reliable diplomatic sources closely monitoring the ongoing situation, a significant political agreement has now been officially reached among EU ambassadors to fundamentally change the current framework of sanctions directed against the Islamic Republic. In fact, to put it more simply, this pivotal change allows the European Union to directly blacklist specific individuals and affiliated entities that are directly responsible for disrupting the critical freedom of navigation in this highly important maritime route. At the same time, it must be clearly stated that practically implementing this complex administrative decision requires considerable time to execute properly, and the EU's External Action Service will need to carefully prepare the new target lists in the coming weeks. While this process unfolds, well, the European Commission is also continuously overseeing the rigorous implementation of broader economic restrictions. Well, these developments show that the war in Iran has directly impacted Europe, and alongside, well, disruptions in supply chains, has put significant pressure on the economies of European countries. For example, here in Germany, this impact is clearly seen in the rising prices of diesel, gasoline, and jet fuel. However, the German government emphasizes that, well, there is no shortage in fuel supply under the current circumstances. Or the German chancellor also announced that while the market situation is tense, well, the energy supply in the country is still guaranteed. But, well, at the same time, he clarifies that if global conditions escalate further, for example, if the devastating war continues to intensify, the government is fully ready to implement further strategic measures, and national energy security will then become an absolute priority. In this same vein, this critical issue is actively being examined at various institutional levels. For example, specialized energy security working groups are currently reviewing different contingency scenarios, and even the National Security Council is expected to officially join this crisis management effort soon, but at the broader EU level, similar assessments already exist. For example, the European Commission has announced that no immediate or severe fuel shortage is currently observed across European countries. However, European countries regularly review the ongoing supply situation, and they have, for example, particularly prioritized securing reliable access to essential resources like jet fuel. In this same diplomatic framework, European officials, in addition to increasing targeted sanctions against the Islamic Republic, also consistently emphasize the need for viable political solutions. For example, regarding the specific issue you mentioned, French President Emmanuel Macron, referring to the highly volatile recent developments in the Strait of Hormuz, has now publicly stated that both the blockade of this crucial maritime route by the United States and the subsequent reaction of the Islamic Republic were significant mistakes, and that tensions in this vital region must be severely reduced.
Thank you, Ali Hassanpour, our correspondent in Berlin. With the ongoing internet outages in Iran, the head of the parliament's Industries and Mines Commission has stated that a plan for businesses to access stable international internet has been approved. Reza Alizadeh said that in the first phase, business card holders and then organizations and production units will connect to international internet after identity verification and observing security considerations. Alizadeh says the process of granting access to smaller units is also underway.
Masoumeh Tarkani, an economic analyst from London, has joined us. Ms. Tarkani, a lot has been said about the damages this prolonged internet outage has inflicted on Iran's economy during this period. How much of a remedy can this piecemeal connection, especially for commercial units, be for this crisis? Look, when you're dealing with a government that turns a fundamental right like a right to employment, which is even in the Constitution, into a privilege and a rent for a specific group, naturally, talking about rationality and effectiveness, well, that might be a misguided discussion. If we want to start by examining this decision they've just made, they're talking about how we're going to give internet access to those who have business cards. Well, even among the members of the Chamber of Commerce, who are almost 500,000 people, less than half of them have access to business cards because, fundamentally, many of them don't even engage in foreign trade to need a business card. So this very issue, right from the start, creates a lot of discrimination and a lack of competitiveness, and the loss of profit and damage it inflicts on businesses isn't easily compensatable. And right now, based on the official statistics the government itself is citing, they're talking about 2 million people becoming unemployed. These 2 million affected individuals are, mind you, only those who possess formal insurance and healthcare coverage. A remarkably large portion of the 25 million employed people in Iran, roughly 10 million of them, unfortunately do not have access to any support system at all, and they are the ones taking the biggest hit. We really need to ask your government this pressing question. You come along and, under the mere pretext of national security, you blatantly take away people's basic right to equal access to information and their right to employment. So how exactly do you intend to fairly compensate them for this immense economic damage? You, who just inherited a 600 trillion toman budget deficit from last year, and for this year, considering the war expenses and the problems you have with oil sales, as well as steel and petrochemical infrastructures, you have no income. Well, so naturally, you can't have a remedy for this employment sector. So put that security excuse aside, and at least create access to small businesses, or your service sector, which make up half of your GDP, which all in all, the outcome of all this shows itself in one place in Iran's economy, and that's poverty. Consider the severe issue of poverty, which unfortunately, right now as we speak, remains a critical crisis. The average income of an Iranian, according to the Ministry of Labor's own official statistics, is currently $5 a day. Compared to the standard the World Bank talks about at least $7 a day. For a country with minimum welfare, you clearly see we have almost a staggering 70 to 80% difference. So right now, this tragic issue causes Iran's population to become increasingly poorer because the minimum window they had to actually generate some reliable income for themselves through the internet, that final remaining hope is completely gone too. And rest assured, a devastating tsunami of mass unemployment will definitely follow soon.
How much might some jobs related to or very connected to the internet just disappear forever? Because I guess if someone has a business that's heavily dependent on the internet, like e-commerce, and sees their internet cut off for over a month, almost 2 months, it's a devastating financial blow. And while since this instability might easily happen again, they'll probably try to enter another market that isn't very connected to the web just to survive. How much can this frequent disruption in the long run completely dry up internet-related businesses from the root?
You asked a very good and timely question. According to an existing estimate, it was announced that businesses operating within the digital economy sector typically have an average financial resilience of merely 20 days. Well, unfortunately, we have now passed the critical 50-day mark, and we are rapidly getting close to 2 full months of sustained disruption. So, right now, those particularly vulnerable small businesses working in the service sector, mostly focusing on the online sales of small goods and services, might just be forced to exit the market forever. This occurs because they neither have the necessary working capital remaining, nor the kind of established credit history to, for example, successfully get emergency loans from the traditional banking system to keep themselves financially afloat. Naturally, a large portion of them will be lost, perhaps even forever. What remains is the middle and upper layer, which are mostly businesses that either have shareholders with strong government backing, or public bodies, or are affiliated with the government. And for them, by virtue of those businesses not really being after profit and income in principle, it doesn't really matter much. Ultimately, they just limit some of their activities. The conclusion is that, with the current situation that has emerged, many businesses, many enterprises, will never be able to return to the market again. And the loss of profit that Iran's economy is seeing from this issue, considering the 7% share that the digital economy has in our GDP, as of right now, after 2 months, 1.5% of it has been lost. And rest assured, this won't be easily filled, because the one who, in the name of the government, that higher authority, should come and think about these issues is now the very cause and creator of this crisis.
Thank you. Masume Tahirkhani, an economic analyst from London, was with us. And thank you for watching tonight's 24 program. In the past few minutes, the US president said that the leadership of the Islamic Republic has caused many oil tankers worldwide to head towards Texas, Louisiana, and Alaska. Thank you for this. This is while uncertainties regarding tomorrow's negotiations in Islamabad continue. Thank you for your companionship. You can watch this program again a bit later on Iran International's YouTube channel.